Hello everybody, we're going to get started now. Thank you for coming to the ULU presidential by-election hustings. My name is Ashley Doolan, I'm the Senate representative of the Elections Committee. I'm standing in for Rob Clark tonight, he can't make it. This is Adam, he's also on the Elections Committee, so we are running tonight. You may or may not be aware that Babak Kinajad can no longer run in this race because he's an international programme student and he didn't meet the requirements to run in ULU, so he's no longer with us tonight. Also, Benedict Maguire is not with us either. He's sustained a sports injury, so I've got a statement to read out to him later on. Just going to let the candidates quickly introduce themselves. So, let's start.
I'm Keenan. I'm from Birkbeck doing community development and public policy in my third year.
I'm Gala Jackson-Coombs from Heythrop College, and I'm my third year philosophy.
Hi, I'm Nathan Long, and I'm at Birkbeck as well, and I'm doing Spanish.
I'm Michael Chessum. I'm a third year, well, more than 3 years, but final year history student at UCL.
I'm Will Hall. I'm a fourth year ESGS student, which no one knows what it means. Essentially, I do Italian and law.
Okay, so the format for tonight will be the candidates will now make a 3-minute speech each. If I could remind you all that this is obviously a safe space, so no shouting, abusive remarks or anything from the audience, please. I'd appreciate that. First person to speak will be Keenan, so over to you, Jed.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. It's not a very good thing to have empty seats in a room this small. It's kind of a bit terrifying to think that we aren't that attractive as a set of candidates. But we actually are quite amazing, as I'm sure we'll actually meet each other afterwards and find out how cool we are as people. Because the reason why I'm standing for election and the reason why I'm looking for you to vote for me is because I think ULU should be a leader in providing a radical education rather than just simply the liberal education that we're currently receiving, which doesn't teach us how to do anything such as holding a meeting that attracts more people than currently here. Having that skill or not having that skill is an issue to do with the quality of our education. I think that we need to have a much more, purposeful education. But I don't think that the institutions that we are members of understand the word that I'm saying. I don't think that there's any way I can communicate this directly. There is no way that I can hit my head against an institution to say that the quality of education I'm receiving is awful. I mean, abysmal, really bad. It may be packaged, it may be labelled as community development, but in reality, that's all it is. There is nothing in there. In fact, last week's, as I mentioned previously, my last lecture was exactly the same lecture as I received a year ago. It was the same materials done by the same lecturer on the same in the same course. It was a complete repeat. So it's currently costing me £80, but it's going to be costing £200 to get exactly the same thing twice. Okay, so maybe I'm just like having a bad experience, but I don't think it's unique. I think that generally the quality of education is really quite poor and there's nothing that anyone can do about it without showing how education should be improved. And I think that has to do with the education that is being provided by ULU. So half a dozen of the constituent institutes and colleges don't have their own website. It seems like an obvious trick that a union of an HE institution should be able to have a website, should have those skills. Okay, if they don't, then that means that ULU has to provide that consultancy service. It has to do it as a very basic, fundamental starting point to any ambitious strategy for improvement of the outcomes of the students of its constituent colleges. And that's what I want ULU for. That's why I want it to continue. That's why I want your votes.
Will?
Thank you. Right, I basically want to bring 3 things to this whole election. First of all, I want to see representation, fair, undivided representation of students. I want to give students back their voice, and I want to make sure that ULU's services are working for the students who are part of ULU, and we get it more accessible, and by doing that more online. So first of all, I don't think that a ULU president should take divisive issues on things like international politics. I don't think that when we had the situation where a student, a ULU president, was going on Newsnight, that should not have been a time at which the entirety of ULU students were being stamped as something that we're not. It should have been a time at which we were demonstrating that cuts on our campuses are not acceptable, and I think that was done poorly. So I want to see a ULU president that, instead of working for just their own political views, instead of stamping their own political views across the entirety of ULU, helps students to do it themselves, which brings me to my next point, which is giving students back their voice. So to do that, if I was elected, I'd set up a campaign pool. So every student, rather than having individual big campaigns that stand across ULU, every single student would have access to this campaign pool, that they would be able to lead, run and choose the direction of their own campaigns, regardless of political support within ULU as an institution. They'd be able to choose what campaigns matter to them, they'd be able to run them themselves, and they'd have access to all these wonderful funding and resources that ULU can provide. And finally, a lot of the interaction that ULU students, University of London students have with ULU is about services, it's about societies, sailing, fencing, all these things that ULU can provide that smaller colleges maybe can't, or the colleges can't because they're too niche activities. And at the moment, you have to come into this physical building. I want to completely change that. I want to make ULU, in terms of its service provision, absolutely online from start to finish. If you want to be a member of a society at ULU, you don't have to come in here and register here. You should be able to do that online. Everything should be online. And as part of that, all the democracy should also be done online. At the moment, the ULU Senate meets, and no one has prior notice of the discussions except the people who are actually involved in the ULU Senate. I would change that entirely so that ULU Senate documents, ULU Senate agenda are online from the very start, so that students can come in and have their say on issues that are being debated here. There is a democratic deficit at ULU, and I would change that. So for the reasons that ULU at the moment has been represented in the past by divisive leaders that alienate small groups of students rather than allowing students to represent themselves, as I do with my Give Students Back Their Voice policies, and because ULU should be online, accessible, not just about a physical building, but about all the services we offer being accessible to colleges that are far outside the central of London, and not just colleges that are around here. So for those reasons, I would like your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Gala?
My name's Gala Jackson-Coombs, and I'd like to put something to you. Do you, as a member of the student body, feel properly represented by ULU? Are we well served by the institution that so vocally claims to represent our views, to have our best interests at heart, to speak for us on a London-wide and national level? I never have. I don't know if you guys have, but I never have. I've always felt disconnected from this distant building in Mallet Street, filled with people who, although they're well-intentioned, don't seem to have the time for me or any of the students I know. Now more than ever, ULU is struggling to remain relevant to the students on a personal level, rather than some high-minded political one. How can we claim to speak for students, to be their voice, with less of 1% of UL body voting in these elections? Not even 1% of people vote in this election. As this room shows, it's pretty empty. The students would be well within their rights to occupy ULU. I could make all kinds of grandiose claims, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by promising the earth and ultimately being crippled by my own ambition. The review of ULU looms large on the horizon, and there's no point trying to run before we can walk when the very future of ULU is at stake. Words like mobilising and fighting are very enticing and sexy, but they are meaningless while ULU is dying a slow and painful death. We're struggling to prove our own legitimacy to the outside world, to London, and even to University of London. And we're not going to do that by shouting. We have to do that by talking, and most importantly, making informed, calculated decisions about the future. There would be nothing more tragic to me, and I think a lot of students, to see ULU fall. The institution itself is a golden opportunity to help students on a day-to-day basis, and we need to be there. ULU is there to have students' backs. I mean, times aren't good to be a student right now. We're facing crises like London Met, the astronomical price of housing, and the constant struggle for equality on our campuses. I want to change that. Changes that will not only help keep ULU relevant, but prove our effectiveness as a student voice, and will hopefully have lasting effects for future UL students. Changes like a part-time officer exec, a scheme to organise intercollegiate skills sharing, a London campaigns network, fully facilitating the promotion of issues that students feel strongly about and want to be heard. Most importantly, I want to make ULU entirely accountable to its students. Not only that, but I want to seriously reform the election process we currently have, to fully engage with all students. The apathy in ULU is the thing that's endangering it, and that above all else is what we need to work on to make ULU strong again.
20 seconds.
Put simply, I want to make ULU the incredible, vibrant institution that I know it can be for all of its students. Not just ones who have a campus around the corner and who have aspirations to a career with a red rosette. ULU is not just about the leading the charge, it's a role that we must serve the students. ULU should not be a figurehead. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks a lot for everyone for coming. I think the room's already been talked about in terms of its size, but I do think it's really disappointing that we've got 140,000 students and they put us in a room this big. Does that say about the identity of ULU? Does it say what it means to each of you? Say what it means to me? Because the main thing that we need to do with ULU is make sure it actually survives. It's under threat in terms of funding, in terms of the direction we're going, in terms of the way people view it. I've been to a few of the campuses and speaking to people, it's a bar. That's all it is, right? It's a swimming pool. The longest one in central London. Okay, you know that about it. Anything else? No? Where is it? People don't know about it. It's theirs to use, and it was established so we could all use it together and mix. And people aren't doing that as much. When you get to societies, the lucky ones who come in the door, who find a society that identifies with them, and that they can identify with, they give them the time to actually have that. They're the ones who find that ULU is actually important, and they get involved in committees, and they get involved in ways to actually keep us alive. But the ones who are at campuses further away, they see no reason to come. Why is that? It's because nothing is reaching out to them, nothing is there. We need to establish robust communication lines that are there continually, all the way through, well after any of us who may become president are in office. So each community, each college, which is a community in itself, can relate what they're doing, we can tell them what we're doing, we can coordinate those issues, we can pull together when there's fundraisers. If there's a particularly good thing on a central, we can go and see it as a group that will actually help line their pockets in terms of the union actually being able to support itself. We can set up ULU as a training centre, so essential skills that are missing maybe from our formal education, be that how to run a society, be that first aid, self-defence, whatever these things might be, they're known that they are accessible, they're known that they can actually be reached out. And like one of my colleagues said, it doesn't have to just be here. You can orientate it, you can organise it, say at Central, say at Heythrop, say any of the colleges, say all the way out Royal Holloway. It doesn't matter, it's up to us, and it's up to the people who get put in office to work with Daniel, to work with Julie, to work with the staff, to actually try and make sure that we're still here in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So we need a longer term plan. When it comes to our review with our funding, we need to try and get a longer term lease. This ridiculous cycle where people are in fear of their jobs who are staff here, or people think this is all going to be over soon. That just leads people to make bad decisions. And we need to make the right decisions to make sure we're still here. So if you're asking what you're voting for me, you're asking for someone who's going to try their damnedest to do that, to keep it here, and to make it relevant to each and every one of you in every single college. Because that's what ULU should be about. It should be your interests that lead us, not us leading you.
I'm running for president because at a time when our basic rights and our basic public services are under attack, we need a democratic, open, resourceful ULU that is capable of leading the student movement in London. For too long, ULU has had appallingly low participation rates. That's very clear. We're now under threat in terms of our buildings, in terms of our funding, and we now have to fight to survive. That's clear, and ULU has to continue to exist. But part of that is going to be about reforming structures, and part of that is about putting things online or doing various technocratic things. But we are not going to engage students and make ULU relevant by live streaming a meeting that no one cares about, by talking about the technocratic ways in which we could make these things somehow more accessible. We will make ULU relevant by fighting and winning on bread and butter issues that mean something to students' lives and capturing their imagination. I want to talk to you about housing, liberation and cuts. What this government is doing to higher education will destroy the futures of an entire generation of people. We've seen the abolition of EMA, we've seen the tripling of tuition fees, we've seen international students being deported. We are facing a future with no environment, no NHS, no public services and no jobs. I've dedicated most of the last 4 years of my life on an almost full-time basis to fighting on those issues. I'm a founding member of the National Campaign Against Fees and Cuts. I think that education is a right, it should be a social, publicly owned good that is funded by taxation of the rich and big business, not by encumbering us and our parents and individuals with huge levels of debt and joblessness. I will work hard to build an anti-cuts assembly on every campus and in every department, and I want to link that to a central democratic way to mobilise ULU. on a London-wide basis. I also want to talk to you about liberation. Students face discrimination and harassment, whether it's the odd rape joke in the bar or whether or not it's facing deportation from the UKBA. At the moment, those students have no way of organising on a cross-London basis, and I want to create those structures. I want liberation officers in ULU. But most of all, I want to talk to you about housing. Housing is potentially the biggest issue for students at the moment in terms of their cost of living and student poverty. Incomes are going down and house prices are soaring. Students are living miles and miles away just to be able to pay their rent. They are choosing between books and food. And if ULU cannot lead a fight on housing, who can on a London-wide basis? Who can lead a fight on housing if not ULU? So I want to create my #1 issue in this election is about housing. It's about making ULU the hub of a giant London-wide housing campaign. And finally, I think that if we capture people's imagination and we bring people into our fold, we can then talk about expanding ULU's membership, we can talk about increasing participation, but we won't increase participation simply by talking about ourselves. We have to go out there and we have to win for students. That's how you do it.
Thanks, Michael. Right, I'm going to read a statement from Ben Maguire, who, as I said earlier, can't make it tonight. Due to a sports injury, I am unable to attend the Hustings this evening, but I'd like to thank the returning officer and myself for organising the event and wish the best of luck to the other candidates. The reason I'm standing in this election is to offer students the chance to vote for a president who truly represents their interests and needs. Far too often we've seen our students' union politicised, putting more effort into taking an official position on moral, religious and international dilemmas rather than standing up for students and enhancing their university experience. There are many issues which can at times divide us as students, with many of us taking a range of standpoints on everything from conflict in the Middle East to abortion. I firmly believe, however, that it is not the job of our students' unions to get involved in such issues, but rather to focus much more on how our lives as students can be enhanced, whether that be campaigning against cuts to higher education or negotiating with the university to get better facilities. The failure to engage students in these elections, reflected by the low turnouts, is surely evidence of students' dissatisfaction and indifference towards our union, which they no longer see as representing their interest. If elected president, I shall make sure that every effort is made by the union to improve facilities for students, as well as making sure their voices are heard by the university. I will bring all of the constituent unions together to make sure all of us speak with one voice on issues that really matter to students, and ensure that everyone's voice is heard in a fair and democratic manner. I also want to continue the great campaigns that ULU has been involved in, and work hard to make sure that students continue to receive a high-quality, value-for-money education, both now and in the future. I will build links with the unions, including those in the TUC, so that coordinated campaigns can take place and an even louder voice can be heard in Whitehall. The success of the London Living Wage campaign has taught us that we are always stronger united than divided, and if we stand as one, we are much more likely to bring about real and permanent change. So if you'd like your students' union to truly represent you and improve your social and academic experience, please vote Ben Maguire for ULU President. Hopefully I did that justice. Right, we're moving on now to opening questions. These are questions that are open to all candidates. So if you have a non-specific question that any of the candidates can answer, we'll take a couple now and then we'll let them answer. So has anyone got any opening questions they'd like to put forward? Anybody at all?
And these are non-specific, so it's to all of them?
Yeah, it's to all of them, just general questions. Jen.
So, whoever it is of you that gets elected president, you'll be chair of the trustee board. That means it's your discretion as to whether students are allowed in to observe meetings or not. So I want to know whether you would, as chair of the trustee board, allow students who turn up to observe the meeting, who care about financial oversight, who want to maybe run for trustee, who want to report on the things that happen there. Would you let them in, or would you want a closed meeting, which is kind of what it is at the moment?
Okay. Any other questions?
Anyone else?
Any other questions first? Az.
Why did you not attend the TUC demo on 26th of October?
We'll take one more, if there is one. Jen?
If no one else doesn't have to.
It's alright.
So, everyone pretty much seems to say they want to make ULU more accessible, or get more people involved with elections, increase participation. How are you practically going to do that? Like, are you prepared to take posters to campuses and go to 7 in one day? You're prepared to do a stall outside? Like, what are your actual practical ideas of implementing these things? Because when you get into office, you'll find actually you're very limited. You don't have a team of staff that you can ask to do these things. So what are you actually going to do practically?
Okay. So you'd like to take it first?
Okay, on the first one, I do a lot of scrutiny. I actually like scrutiny, but there is an issue that there is some that have to be closed. So I am told that a part of the agenda is not available for public scrutiny, and I have to leave the room. So I understand the two, but yes, when there is an option, attend a boring meeting, absolutely. There should be always that option. On the issue of whether or not I attended, I actually was trying to persuade my partner about taking my boy along, but I had childcare responsibilities, couldn't attend. But at some point, he will go along to his first demo. We actually did attend the Bloomsbury thing in Central, and I got him carrying an SWP placard around saying, Tories out or something like that. And everyone was going around saying, yeah, that's a good idea. And I said, yes, because my son being Rory's not a Tory. On the third issue, you have to remind me what that third one was, which was, what am I going to do about...
Practically, literally.
I'm a ball of energy. I love this stuff. I really do. I mean, I have canvassed about 30,000 people in the last 5 years. I knock on people's doors. I ring people up. I'm a madman for it. Absolutely, 100%. Because I think, like, first of all, I've got a gut. I need to sort that one out. But more importantly, you've got to lead by actually doing the hard work. And I have no problem with hard work. It's the other way around. It's actually... I have to kind of put the hard work to one side and do some more strategic work. The actual hard work stuff is the stuff I want to be doing. The strategic work is kind of a bit boring.
Gala?
Okay. First question. Like with Senate meetings, unfortunately, publicising it is always a problem. There doesn't seem to be enough publication before the actual dates to allow people to attend even Senate meetings, let alone trustee board meetings. I completely agree that it should be open for everyone to attend. As much as they can physically be open to people, because obviously it's in everyone's interest, and they should at least be able to observe meetings, including Senate, because at the moment we only have senators really that go and the odd observer, so I can continue report. I didn't attend the TUC demo. Our UCU branch chose not to go and felt quite strong about not going. I don't know why they chose against it. Also, I had a paper deadline because they chose one paper, so that was kind of quite important at the time. On the third one, being from a small specialist institution and an only SAB, I completely understand not having a team. I only had part-time student officers sort of on my back, or it didn't get done basically because obviously they have their own commitments being full-time students. Also, going around campuses, not a problem. I mean, today I've gone around 7 campaigning, and so that's not even for something that's as important as people voting, you know, separate from me. So I think it's really important to have people actually getting involved in elections that way. I mean, I also think that the reason people aren't turning out is because there's a lack of a link and a connection between them in their normal student daily lives and ULU. If the elections were more college-centric, if there was more of a buzz around your college and it was linked to your college somehow, and there was a bit more of a kind of campaigning spirit on each campus, I think that would change. I think that small institutions, especially kind of like mine and CSSD and other ones, don't have those people come to our campuses because we don't have that many votes for them to win. So that apathy continues because then we don't feel cared about. So that would be.
First question, I would like it to be as transparent as possible. Good, happy. Second one, TUC, I was actually running around trying to get my nomination form signed in the morning before handing in, because that was the deadline. And they were actually at Stratford most of that week because they had some big show on all the big wigs who had to sign my thing. Found someone around about 11 o'clock to do it, and I handed it in. And then I was preparing for diving exam the next day, which allowed me to actually, allow me to teach my guys even more and give up my time. That's what I was doing. And then in terms of the last question, like I already said, I was at 3 different campuses last night speaking to people who, most of them didn't even know where ULU was. A couple did know they were University of London. That was King's, LSE and Courtauld. Actually they had a show on, so I couldn't speak to them, but I spoke to some of their reps outside. And I was at Central on Monday speaking to the VP, briefly to their president, that he was running around, so he had to go to a meeting. And I intend to go to as many as possible. All right.
Okay, so first question, trustees. Trustees are a weird thing in student union in terms of there's arguments about whether or not they should exist at all. Yes, it was wrong that you were kept out of a trustee meeting the other day, and yes, I would allow observers into trustee meetings. Student unions are run by and for students, if trustees somehow think that they have the power to overrule and feel like they have the moral legitimacy to overrule the democratic structures of any union, we've got a problem. Keeping as many students in the room to keep an eye on them is a very good idea from that point of view. TC demo. I was not only on the TC demo, I was one of the lead organisers and the chief steward of the Education Feeder March, which left from outside of ULU. I worked closely with the current Vice President and with others to facilitate that march. We had a very, very successful day. It was about measured in thousands of students that we got along. I was on the TEC demo, and I'm on most demos because I'm organised by the TEC, because I think that the fight for kind of education and for public education cannot be divorced from a broader campaign around the idea of public services and about opposing the government's whole austerity agenda. And I think that our best allies in that are organised workers. I think that trade unions and people in workplaces are our best place to give us that boost, and there's a mutual relationship there. Third question was, remind me.
Practical things.
Practical things, what would I actually do?
Literally.
And you're very right to ask that question, because actually everyone's going to go, you know, we're all really energetic, we're all going to run around and that's going to happen. Actually, it's about creating a campaign that students feel really engaged with. It's about having ULU fight on issues that actually matter to students, which is outward looking, not inward looking. That will create some fervour on campus. And it's about having, like, basically bringing in people from colleges all over the University of London who are willing to build it on their own campus. Because you're right, realistically, I can run around every campus I like. You're going to talk to a maximum of a few hundred students every time you do that. And that's not actually a very sustainable, systematic way to build election turnout. So again, it's about issues, and it's about bringing people in and persuading people that ULU is worth fighting for and worth getting involved in, rather than just ramming lots of leaflets in people's faces. We need to build a culture. Cool.
In terms of the trustee board, there's a very clear way to deal with this, which is that other democratic institutions like local government have a system whereby everything is open to scrutiny and anyone can attend, except for issues that are, for legal reasons, have to be confidential. And should students or student officers decide what those things are? No, absolutely not. The people who decide that are the people who set down the legal parameters of what is not confidential, and that is clear, and that's not something that students should have decisions about. So with that to one side, absolute transparency for every meeting, and students should never be able to block other students coming into them. In terms of the TUC, I wasn't at the march, but I don't know why it matters. My campaign is entirely about the liberal idea that students should have their own critical views and that they shouldn't be stamped on by unions. They shouldn't have one view given to them by unions, people who are elected by 1% of the share of the vote. So it doesn't matter what I think about anything, except that I want students to have their voice, and I want unions to stop trying to squash their voice. So, you know, I think I wasn't doing anything else that day, I just didn't want to go. And finally, on physical presence, I think constituent colleges and the unions there have a duty to provide more engagement activities with their own college students than they are at the moment, via the emails, the weekly emails, for instance, that unions send out. But in terms of running around campuses and trying to engage lots of people, obviously, I think anyone who's running in this campaign, just to meet the nomination requirements, has run around all the colleges and got engaged and trying to get as many students signing a piece of paper. I'm not the most energetic person in the world, but I am the most bloody-minded when it comes to making people aware that their union is operating and making sure that they're going to have a say in the way in which the union is operating. So perhaps I'm like a normal student, I'm quite lazy when it comes to getting out of bed, but I'm bloody-minded and I end up spending an entire night if I get my mind fixated into one thing, and at the moment my mind is fixated in spending a year ensuring that our student unions are blown open so that democracy is finally having its say when it comes to student issues.
I'll take a second round of open questions if there are any. For those of you who came in late, these are just open questions for all candidates, no specifics so far.
Okay, firstly, would you describe yourself as a revolutionary? If so, why? If not, why not? And also, do you think that ULU needs a revolutionary as ULU president?
Any more questions?
Are you going to make sure that SABs are held accountable, like more, maybe that's a word list, more accountable? That'd be better, yeah.
I personally have one question myself. As a member of the London Liberation Network, I am obviously invited into the protection of liberation groups and also the pushing forward of their rights on campus. What would you each do as candidates in order to make sure that the rights of liberation groups are protected and that their right to actually push forward on our campuses?
Jumping in.
Do you want the same order again?
We'll go opposite way around this time.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'll try not to feel ganged up on. Right, first question. So I was busy scribbling them down.
You're revolutionary.
Am I revolutionary? No. Come on. Well.
If not, why not? I think you need to be one. And if not,
I am not a revolutionary because a revolutionary takes one set of ideas and thinks the entire world should be part of that one set of ideas, regardless of whether anyone has been involved in the process of creating those ideas or whether anyone has actually fed in or engaged in views. So no, I'm not a revolutionary because I think that every student has their own voice. I think we should facilitate those views rather than trying to stamp them out like certain wings of this union politics have done in the past. In terms of SAB's transparency, if I get elected, then my timetable will be on the internet. Everything I do will be transparent. I'll treat it as if the FOI, is always standing there. So transparency is vital. It would be very hypocritical of me to stand here now and say that I want only liberal policies in certain areas. I want liberal policies everywhere. So transparency would be one of the core principles to which I work. In terms of liberation campaigns, we, I think, have a problem in that we're not doing enough. I would like to see a full-time sabbatical officer here in the next few years that will actually be totally dedicated to ensuring. I personally wouldn't choose to give them a specific title, but just someone who is there to fight on a day-in-day basis every student to have whatever beliefs or whatever, to live their life how they want to. It doesn't matter. Like, what matters as a student is how my work is. And if anyone wants to treat me a different way because of my lifestyle choices or because of who I am, then that's just not acceptable. So I would have a full-time sabbatical officer who would work and fight day in, day out for those issues. And as far as I'm concerned, I doubt anyone here will say it. Liberation, will disagree with me, liberation campaigns have to be a priority for ULU. There's no doubt about that. And if I'm elected, I'll do absolutely everything I can to support that. Michael, it was SAB transparency.
Okay, so, forget the questions already. Am I a revolutionary? Well, unlike Will, I'm not a Tory party councillor. But if you...
That's not the safe space.
You're not allowed to mention
You didn't say it in the way that was on the
But okay, so am I a revolutionary? My politics about education and housing and everything else that I'm saying don't exist in isolation. I think that universities should be run by staff and students, not by unaccountable managers. If that's revolution on campus, call that revolution on campus. I think that workplaces and the economy should be controlled democratically rather than by who has the most money. If you call that revolutionary, call that revolutionary. I'm not going to turn ULU into an armed insurrection. No one's pretending that. And if you ask me, do I believe in violent revolution? The answer is very simply, I don't even know. Like, what are we even, like, what are the parameters of revolutionary here? I believe in fundamental change in society. I call myself a socialist, but I don't think that that necessarily means that you have to be scared of it. I actually think that in practical terms, a lot of the things that I would say about politics, housing, cuts, liberation, are actually pretty much a majority view amongst students. So, yes, and no, and maybe. And I'm not dodging the question because I've given you a fairly rounded view of what my politics are. And they're founded in democracy, not in some making people believe something that they don't believe. I mean, this is a political argument, and political priorities are important. And I don't think that simply having a political priority is somehow cutting any swell of students out necessarily. SAB accountability. This is the kind of thing that can be done through quite technocratic means in a way. It means good circulation of minutes regularly. But actually, I think the best way to hold people to account is to get them in a room with an awful lot of real students. I don't think that by live streaming Senate meetings we can somehow bring presidents to their downfall whenever they do anything wrong. I actually think we have to institute a culture of democracy. Back in 2010 we had something called the London Student Assemblies, and they were grounded towards particular things. They were grounded towards mobilising for massive national demonstrations, and they were good at what they did actually. But actually I think we need those on a much more regular basis, and to hold sabbatical officers and officers in general to account, rather than simply mobilising for one thing. So my answer to that is grassroots democracy and the ability of ordinary students to get involved. For as long as ULU is driven by Senate alone, ULU will not be a truly accountable organisation, and no amount of live streaming or circulation of minutes or anything else will change that. No amount of personal energy from any president would either. Liberation. I've been involved in liberation campaigns a lot during my time as a student. I've attended an NUS LGBT conference quite a bit, and I've been an LGBT officer on a national level with a national campaign against fees and cuts. Liberation is at the core of everything I want to do. I think part of that is issues-based and part of that is about campaigning on issues. But I think structurally speaking, which is maybe more what the question was, I want to create a full-time women's officer. Unions across the country have a full-time women's officer. Cambridge, Oxford, Manchester, various campuses across the country have one. I see no reason why ULU shouldn't, especially given how male-dominated this candidate field is, and especially given how poor liberation has been in ULU. I also think we need part-time executive officers which are elected at the same time as sabbatical officers, and those should all include liberation officers. In other words, we need to bring LGBT, women's, black students and disabled students priorities through an officer, but also through grassroots networks like the London Liberation Network to fruition via those structures. So yeah, I want to elect more officers. I'd like to find the cash, and cash will be the problem, to create a full-time women's officer. I'll be honest about that. But I think that's what needs to happen. It needs to be quite radical, or else we'll end up kind of, yeah, again, seaming around the edges and talking about ourselves.
All right, so am I a revolutionary? No, I do not think of myself as a revolutionary. But it all depends what you do, what you think a revolutionary is. If you're talking about the characteristics of ones that I pick out, you possibly say strong-willed, determined, focused, arguably, some are manic. But those might be three things that, yes, I think every candidate for the presidency should be strong-willed, should be focused, should be in a position that they know they're going to have to give up the majority of any social life they ever acquired, because if they're going to deliver something for 140,000 students, there's a lot of different voices that need answering. So yeah, I think you need the aspects of it, but no, I do not regard myself as one. There was a third part to that, was that kind of covered it both?
Do you think ULU needs a revolutionary?
No. Like I said, I think it needs someone who has those characteristics, and many more. Okay. In terms of your question, I think in terms of accountability, I think everybody who takes on a role, whatever their job, should be accountable to it. I don't think they should be able to get away with just turning up, clocking in, clocking out, and going home, without actually putting in what you wanted them to put in, and that's why you elected them. But I'm more interested to know what you would want in terms of accountability, because I think we should know what all the students want in terms of things like this. So what would you want?
Now?
Yeah, now in terms of accountability, you said you wanted SABs to be more accountable. What exactly do you mean?
Like,
How would you like to be accountable?
Well, I feel like ULU is completely disconnected from most campuses personally. Like, my campus doesn't really, no one knows what it is a lot of the time, so if people don't know what ULU is, how are they meant to hold their SABs to account? Yeah, basically. Absolutely. So you're talking like a system of education for whoever the SABs are, to make sure that the different colleges, institutions, schools, whichever way you wish to phrase it, actually have an idea of what we're meant to be doing. That's why I asked you, yeah. Yeah, so that's what you want. So that would be up to us to make sure that everyone, as I was saying earlier on, has an insight into what's going on here. Yeah. And you make those communication lines very clear. So from a union, from an individual at college or institution or school, they can all feed back to you. And like you say, if someone's got a particular point, or saw you doing something, or heard you did something, then they should be answered about it. So yeah, I do believe they should be very accountable. The last question, which has just skipped out of my head, it was there, it's gone again, sorry, I should apologise. Liberation groups, sorry, it's yours, that's why you're behind me, sorry. Well, liberation groups, I think since 2007 when it got reviewed and we had the SAB stripped away,
I would worry that things have maybe not been as they're meant to do, or in terms of, for instance, Daniel's been VP and President, running around probably chasing his tail, but trying to do the best he can, and from what I know, doing a very good job. I think it's important that we try and get volunteers to come in. I think we try and ask people, do you want to champion something? Because there's nothing more powerful, like you said about revolutionaries. If you've got someone who feels that, is passionate about that, then there's no reason they shouldn't be facilitated. So I see the role of the SAB as trying to facilitate any individual who wants to champion a particular thing. And be they from a college, or be they a strong part of the union like yourself, then I see absolutely no problem with that. Building towards, as Will was talking about, in terms of if we can make sure ULU survives, if we can put it on a stronger financial footing, then trying to rebuild the SABS team. Okay?
Got it?
Right, okay, first question, revolutionary. Do I personally think I'm a revolutionary? No, I don't personally think I'm a revolutionary. I don't think it's revolutionary to want to represent students' views in this kind of big scale. Also, I feel if I said I was revolutionary, it would be kind of my personal politics that I would be standing on, whereas I really want to stand on the students' view and what students think, and that should be what I'm passionate about most, not about my own personal politics. However, I do think that ULU does need a revolution. I think that in some, it needs huge amounts of saving. You know, we've got this ULU review by University of London, and University of London doesn't think that there's one person who is has a mandate to represent University of London students, which was said by someone who runs the review. And that's supposed to be the whole point of ULU president, and they don't take us seriously, and they're our university. So it really needs a huge revolution in that sense, and also from representing the students and having them more engaged, because no one engages. So I think that in that way it does, and you know, my website is revolution. So yeah, I think that that is appropriate in that way. Second, accountability. In my manifesto I outlined a couple of things about accountability, because I think it is really, really crucial. At the moment, that I couldn't find a way to keep SABs accountable. I could try and put something through Senate, or try and find out when they are. I mean, that's the first thing, is working out a time and a way to present Senate dates in a timely way, so students can actually maybe attend if they wanted to bring something up. The other things that I mentioned in my manifesto, a Q&A session every month, directly with students, to whoever wants to turn up, so you are there in front of them and they can ask you whatever they want, obviously. Hopefully not being too rude, but yes, as long as they're asking you practical things, and you can give them direct feedback, and you can be made accountable for any decision or issue that happens. Also, really simple things like putting a public Google Calendar on to make sure that I'm not slacking off. Should I get it? So you see where I'm going every minute of every day, see what meetings I've got, see where I am. So if you're around the college that I'm at, you can come and question me yourself. Also things like techie things like a VU that people can ask me questions, and I can give them a personalised video response and stuff like that, and making sure that I'm on Twitter and Facebook replying, all that kind of stuff. But I think those are kind of key things. As with liberation networks, I mean, I know how hard it can be being a SAB and being kind of attacked by my own institution for being a woman. It's not always a great place to be when you don't feel like you've got any support. So I went to the most recent Liberation Network meeting at ULU, and what kind of came out of that is that they actually kind of felt that they needed support, rather than feeling like they needed to be some kind of structured network. They just needed support there so that they can do their jobs on their campuses, and maybe support from other institutions, so that they feel like they've got backing from other places, and that everyone can kind of be solid with each other and support each other that way. So I hope that's
Yes, I know, very finished. Absolutely, 100%. I don't even know much about tipping points, but you imagine that the traffic jam is caused by all cars getting very close together and then one slightly slowing. That causes a traffic jam. So everyone trusts that they're going in that way, and all of a sudden, one slight minor change in the whole system collapses. Okay, right, that's a basic. This place is floating away. This place is so far away from anything which I think of as barest minimum that literally the only thing left is a revolution. It's got no way forward apart from an earthquake. It's literally, there's massive amounts of energy and nothing is getting done. It's amazing. I mean, anyone who comes after me is going to have a hard time doing anything